Hi everyone and welcome to this short screencast. My name is Joshua and I'm a data engineer at Dane Studios, and I will guide you today through a hands-on session on agentic AI, especially on the use case study on agentic workflow design. And we are going to have a look at n8n, how to actually build an agentic AI workflow. So maybe let's start by remembering what you heard already in the session before. So, as instructed by your teachers, we want to close the loop in this kind of resulting workflow that you came up with. So maybe let's start by having a look at this workflow. So there are some interesting things we need to consider, and there are some principles I want to show you and highlight in this kind of workflow. So we are always starting with this trigger, and then we have two agents, and we kind of can already think about how to implement those agents, what tools are needed for those. For example, we have this trends agent right here, and the goal of the trends agent, of course, is to find like the latest trends. So maybe that could be an agent that is using some kind of web search tool. Then we have the product ideation agent, which maybe don't necessarily need another tool, but is rather dependent on the input of the agent before. And then we also have like two human in the loop interfaces right here. So that's also we need to consider when we are building our solution, that we need some kind of interface to actually be able to talk to a human person. And of course, in the end, there's some kind of output when the workflow has finished. So I think that's a cool use case for using n8n as a tool. So n8n is kind of this automation workflow tool that I will show you in a second. And we are kind of touching all of the different things that are important when we are building an agent, like the core reasoning engine, the context and the memory handling, and of course, tools and actions. And we will also touch a little bit on guardrails, how to instruct the agents to do what they should do. So we are now on n8n in the web browser. You can access n8n via any web browser really. And depending if n8n is either in a self-hosted environment or if you're using some cloud version of it, the URL might be a little different, but in this case, just reach out to your internal IT department and they are probably the best to help you in this case. So I'm kind of in my personal directory right here, where I can create new workflows. And let's do this by going here at the top of the red button and hit create workflow. So it just takes a little second and we are greeted in a new window where we can set up our workflow. So n8n is this kind of node-based system, and there are a lot of nodes available that you can choose from. So for example, if I go to this plus icon here, we can see there are some kind of categories already for some nodes. And as we've seen in kind of the course outline, we need to start with a trigger. And there are some different types of triggers, like for example, just a manual trigger, a scheduled trigger, where we can set, like for example, some dates where the trigger should be executed, for example, like every Sunday at 10 p.m. And there are some more interactive triggers, and we are going to use the on-chat message trigger for today, because with that we have kind of the freedom to also have an interactive chat interface here directly in n8n so that we can explore our solution. So great, we have our input trigger right here, and of course we can change this trigger out at a later stage to some kind of other trigger, for example the scheduled trigger. And if you are kind of remembering what we saw on the slides for this workflow, the next thing then would be creating this trend agent. So that's the part where it gets interesting, right? We are adding a new node here, and we want to have an AI agent node. So I'm selecting AI, and I want to have this AI agent. So when we kind of select a new node in n8n, we are always greeted with this kind of menu right here where we can define the actual settings of this node. So in this AI node, we have a few settings that are interesting for us. So for example, we have this source right here, and you can see it's already connected to the chat input trigger node. So that's, in our case, really nice because we also want to interact with this via chat. But if you want to have some kind of other triggers, we can also select a different option here and explore this. If I go back to the n8n canvas, we can now see that we have our AI agent node right here. So maybe let's give it a more meaningful name. I can do this by just double clicking into this kind of headline here, and then I can give it a name, for example, trend agent, so that we know, okay, that's our trend agent doing the work. So an agent, as you also learned from the theory, consists of a few things. So the first thing would be the core reasoning engine, and the core reasoning engine is defined by the chat model. So you can see the agent can be expanded by connecting a chat model. And if I click on the little plus icon here, the context menu is opening, and I see some kind of predefined selection of different chat models from different vendors that I can use. In our case, I want to use an OpenAI chat model, so I choose OpenAI chat model. So now there's a little bit more setup to do right here. First of all, we need some kind of credential to authenticate against the model. In this case, it's probably also best to just ask your IT department for how you can get those credentials, and they will help you set it up. In my case, I already did this prior, and I can use a credential for OpenAI that I created prior to this recording. The really interesting part, however, is not authentication, but rather which kind of model do we want to use. So we can select from this list, and it shows us all of the available models that OpenAI is providing. We have some legacy models that are by nowadays standards probably outdated, like the GPT-3.5, and then we have some more recent models like GPT-4.1, and then also in this very, very long list, GPT-5 mini, for example, or like the more advanced GPT-5.1, and also like different other codex models, audio models, everything you need basically. So our first kind of thought should be, what kind of model do we want to use? And in this case, I would always start with kind of a smaller model that is acting fast so that we can kind of test it out quickly. And if we see that's maybe not enough for us, then I would scale it up to kind of the normal model. So I would start with the GPT-5 mini here. And then if we noticed that the output is not efficient enough or sufficient for us, I would go with the GPT-5, for example. So I will just select this here. And as we hear, web search. So I have some options here to configure the web search. I think for now, medium context size should be enough. But if you want to change this, you can do this at any point and just select a different option. So with the core reasoning engine set up, there are a few more things we need to consider. For example, memory. And memory is important so that if we ask follow-up questions, the agent stays in context. And for this, we can also click on the plus button here. And for now, I will choose the simple memory. That's a memory that will be in n8n's kind of directory, but we could also connect it to some kind of external database if we find ourselves finding this more useful for our use case. But now the simple memory is just fine. And I don't need to specify anything here. Then we also have the section for tools. So we could also connect some external tools here, like, for example, another database and different other integrations. n8n is providing a rich list of integrations here. But since we already choose kind of the built-in tool for the web search, we don't need to specify anything else here. And then we are again on kind of the reasoning and also the guardrails. So we kind of need to define how our agent acts. And for this, I'm going back to the agent, just double clicking on it. And what I want to do is I want to add a new option here, which is called system message. And in this field, I want to paste in the instructions for the agent. So you can see there's already a default instruction that you are a helpful assistant, but that's not really true in our case, because what this agent should do is kind of researching trends. So I would probably start writing out the prompt like, you are a trend assistant that can search the web for the latest product information. So of course that's not an ideal prompt, and we also kind of need to tweak it a little bit. And as a best practice, I would suggest kind of making maybe a list of bullet points what the agent should really be. Then go, for example, to ChatGPT and use ChatGPT to really phrase out the system message and instructions for the agent, and then just come back and paste it in here. So, and I did this really quickly in the background. I was asking ChatGPT for a better prompt for a trend agent, and you can quickly see what it came up with. So I also included some of the details that were given in the slides in the last course, or in the last section of the course. And I'm also then defining directly some guardrails in the system prompt. For example, I'm saying that it should only use the built-in web search results and don't come up with anything else, by actually explicitly saying, do not invent any data. And this is like a really, really important guardrail to consider, so that we can be sure that the agent is kind of providing valuable and correct information and not hallucinating about something that maybe isn't even true. And of course, I then included a little bit more about the company and his objectives, to create a trend report, for example, some kind of analysis steps he should do. And as I said, we have a few more kind of soft guardrails right here. And then I'm basically kind of defining the output format, how it should look like. And what I will do now is I just copy all of this, go back to n8n, and replace my kind of first draft with this more advanced thing. And I will then go back to the canvas and save the workflow. So that's also important. Always save your workflow, that you don't get interrupted and may lose something you already built. So let's take a moment and recap what we already did. So as you can see, we have a trigger. In our case, it's this chat input message, and we already set up the trends agent. So next would be the product ideation agent. So for this, we are kind of adding or expanding our workflow here, adding a new AI agent, in this case, again, an AI agent. We'll check the parameters in a second. Probably first good practice is to give it a name. So this should be the product ideation agent, and go back to the canvas. So as you can see, also this agent kind of has the same parameters as the last one. We need a chat model. So I go again on chat model, select OpenAI, select my credentials. These are actually the same credentials I used before. Then I already have again the model selection. So as the last time, I would go with the GPT-5 Mini first, kind of see how that performs. But as you can see, the task of this agent should be ideation. So maybe it needs to think a little more. So we can actually try to go with the GPT-5.1 model here, which just has a little bit more capabilities in kind of thinking. Choosing another model like Pro might be overkill for this at this point, but GPT-5.1 is kind of a good middle ground. So, and in this case, this agent don't really need any tools, because it's just depending on the output that the trend agent is creating. But of course, it needs some kind of memory. And for simplicity, I would use the same simple memory that we set up already for the other agent and just connect it to this agent. So with that, also the two agents are kind of sharing the same context, and we make sure that they are aware of what already happened here. Then we need to define the input for the product ideation agent. And in this case, it's not the connected chat trigger node, but we want to define it below. And for this, I will actually execute the workflow so that I can see what inputs and outputs are available. And that's also a cool practice that you can do in n8n. You can execute the workflow at any time and just don't need to wait until like the whole thing is built out. And this really helps also for understanding the tiny details and debugging it. So I will go back to the main canvas here, and I go to Open Chat, and I can see there's this kind of small chat window popping up at the bottom of my screen. And I maybe start with a short prompt like, can you help me find some ideas for skincare products? So great. And we can now see at the output panel right here, from the output tree, I selected the output of the OpenAI chat model. We can see the actual output the trend agent created. So we can see it came up with some ideas, some trends, and it's actually linking the source, which is really nice for having this kind of reliability and also confirmation where the data comes from. And we now want to use this to kind of shape the product ideation agent. So I will go back by double clicking on the product ideation agent. And we can see, and that's the really cool interactive thing about n8n, that we already see kind of the outputs from the prior nodes. And in this case, we can see our trend agent here with the output. And I want to give this output as the input into the product ideation agent. So what I'm going to do right here is just select this output and drag and drop it into this. And to give it a bit more meaning and context, I will actually call it trend report, because I, as for the last agent, need to define a system message right here describing what the product ideation agent should do. And I want to kind of reference the trend report from above so that it is actually using this input. And as suggested for the last time, I would write out some bullet points, maybe paste that into ChatGPT or any other AI tool that you're using to kind of help you phrase the system prompt. I already did this in this case, and I came up with this kind of system prompt using the same practices we already used for the trend agent. So by just saying what this agent is about, and then also giving some instructions that it should create a long list of product concepts, it should use the trend report, and it must use the trends identified by the trends agents. And this is actually a guardrail that we are seeing right in the system prompt here. And then also I kind of defined what kind of different objectives the agent has and also the output format. So pretty similar as we did with the last agent. And I'm just going to copy this and paste it in to the system message right here. So very cool. With this, also the product ideation agent is set up and we are ready to use the whole workflow. So great, we now have our kind of basic AI workflow ready. And let's see, open the chat and execute it so that we can evaluate what we already have. So I'm going to ask my question again, if it can help me set up some ideas for skincare products. So, and we can see the whole workflow is running, and I will come back shortly when the whole workflow is executed and we will evaluate the output. So great, our workflow executed successfully, and we can see that we created a little more output right here with a long list of cool ideas that the AI agent came up with. And the last pieces that I am going to show you in this section is how we can build the human in the loop interface. And for this, we are adding a new node, and you can already see there's this category called human in the loop. I'm selecting this, we can see a bunch of integration services that we can use, and I want to use Microsoft Outlook, and we also need to connect our Outlook account, and in this case it's also best to just ask your IT department how this can be set up, and they will provide you with the credentials that you need for it. I already created them prior to this, and then I'm going to configure this Outlook node so in a way that it sends out an email that I can either approve or disapprove with the list of ideas that the agent created. So I'm going to send this to myself right here. We can choose a subject for the email, for example, ideation list, and then we can define the message. So that's actually the body of the email, what should be there. And I can, of course, say something like, hey, Joshua, your ideas are ready for approval. And then I just want to kind of really see the output that the product ideation agent created. And I can do this or add this output by simply drag and drop it into here. And you can see this little green code block is resolved into the actual message. And then I can define which kind of response type I want to have in this mail. And of course, I want to have approval, and I can also add some approval options. And in this case, I want to either approve or disapprove it. I can then customize the different buttons for the email text, but I will stick with the default options. And then I can execute this step here, and I will quickly show you how that looks. And that's kind of the end of this little section. So yeah, and that's the email that I received from myself with the product concept long list. And we can see the structured list of ideas that I can either approve or disapprove. So there are a bunch of ideas that I can read through, and then I can decline or accept, I can decline or approve it. And if I go to approve this, or even if I say decline, this will trigger the next actions in the workflow. So for this example, I'm just going to approve it. And a little web page is opening that n8n got the answer. I can close it and come back to n8n. So back in n8n, we can see the output of the Outlook node, and we have approved true since I clicked on approved. And with this, I can then add more nodes and define the behavior I want. I would probably go next with kind of an if block. So I can quickly show this to kind of route it. I'm going to select approved as equal to true so that I can then branch out if the approval is all right. I can do whatever I want to do. And if the approval was not given, then I can maybe, as in the slide suggested, go back to the product ideation agent and kind of refine my ideas. And then of course I could include some other nodes here, like another AI agent that is maybe kind of refining the ideas. I think you get the idea, and I hope this little tutorial was helpful for you. I would suggest just go to n8n, try it out for yourself and see what you can build. Have a nice day and see you soon.